Hi folks, HR Funk here. Hard to believe, but I've come to the end of my Law Enforcement Qualification Course Challenge series. And after 2 years, I didn't want to let that series fade away without taking a look back at exactly what all went into putting it together. I thought some of you might be interested in hearing about some of the behind-the-scenes things that took place with the qualification series, some of the things that were unexpected that happened, some of the things that I hoped that were going to happen that didn't happen, and just everything that went into putting this together over the course of the past 2 years. So with that little bit of an introduction, let's take a look at what went into the Law Enforcement Handgun Qualification Series. Initially, I had no idea or thoughts of producing any kind of series with regard to law enforcement firearms qualification courses. I started things out back actually about 3 years ago, and the whole thing came about because of my dislike of the current Ohio handgun qualification courses. And I made some videos more or less poking fun at those courses, and you may have even seen some of these. I shot through the carbine qualification course with a lever action carbine rather than the AR platform that course was intended for. I also shot through that same course with an M1 Garand, and eventually I shot through it with my M1903 Springfield, just to show that course was easy enough that someone with those archaic firearms could still pass the qualification standard. Interestingly, there were at least some officers in Ohio that took exception with that. They thought that I was suggesting that police officers go back to using something like a lever action carbine. However, I think there are some officers, and I said this in response to one of the comments that I received, who probably would be better off with a lever action carbine than an AR platform, because the lever action is a little bit simpler. There's not as many controls. The manual of arms is not as detailed. And I just think, in fact, I know there are some officers that would be better served by that platform. But I was not suggesting a return to that when I produced those videos. In any case, when I produced the carbine qualification with the lever action, it was actually one of my lever action Marlins, there was a firearms instructor from, I believe, Nebraska, a law enforcement firearms instructor, who saw that video and he liked it, and he asked me if I would shoot their qualification course. So he subsequently sent me a target, and he sent me a copy of the course description, and I fired that using my Fulton Armory FAR 15A1, and I also shot their handgun qualification with my Smith & Wesson Model 686. Again, just thinking that was going to be a one-time thing, ha-ha, and then go on to make other videos. Well, someone else saw that video from a different state, and they sent me a qualification course and a target and asked me if I would shoot their course. So I shot that one. And somewhere along the line, someone got a hold of me and asked me if I would rate the courses as to which ones I thought were the best. And that idea started to circulate in my mind a little bit, and I started to think that it might be interesting to put together a course where I compared every state in the country, every state in the United States, in terms of their law enforcement firearms qualification course to all the others, and then tried to come up with what I thought was the best one. So that was the genesis of this whole series, and from there everything else moved forward. Now, early on, when I was still contemplating this series, it occurred to me that I might have an opportunity to do something that had never been done before in the realm of firearms training, and specifically law enforcement firearms training, that being to fire a law enforcement firearms qualification course from every state. And to my knowledge, I'm the only person who's ever done that. If any of you know of another person who has ever fired a law enforcement firearms qualification course from each of the 50 United States, please let me know, because I don't know of anyone else who's ever done that. I think so far what I've done is unique in the realm of firearms training. And that idea of doing something that had never been done before really motivated me, and I thought this would really be something. Again, to do something unique in the realm of firearms training, a topic that has so many recognized experts and so many people that have contributed so much to the overall body of knowledge, to have just a small place in there where I had done something that no one else had ever done really, again, it motivated me, it captured my imagination, and it gave me the idea to really try to do this and see if I could put it together and make it happen. Another thing that occurred to me when I was contemplating this entire project was that I wanted it to have some meaning. I didn't want it to just be a stunt where I got done shooting a course from each one of the states and said, haha, look what I did. Isn't that cool? You know, aren't I a great guy? By the way, I used the term expert in the last segment, and I just want to point out, I do not consider myself to be an expert of any sort. I don't even really know what that word means. I am someone who has the benefit of a great deal of firearms related training, and as an instructor I try to pass that on to others. But as far as an expert, please don't use that term when referring to me, because again, I'm not even really sure what that means. But again, I wanted this series to have some meaning beyond just firing a course from each of the 50 states. So when I was thinking about rating the courses, and keeping in mind this had never been done before, I knew I was going to have to come up with a system or a measurement somehow to evaluate the courses and determine this course was a better qualification course than that course. And in order to do that, I had to stop and think about what exactly a law enforcement firearms qualification course is. And what I decided is it's an evaluation of an officer's critical shooting skills that can be used to determine that officer's preparedness for an actual lethal force encounter. And so along those lines, I started to think about the different critical skills that can be evaluated in the context of a firearms qualification. And if you've seen the previous semi-final videos that I did, you know that I listed those into 22 different critical skills, and then I decided to rate those courses depending upon how many of those critical skills the individual course assessed. And of course you also know that I had to come up with a way to break ties, because when there were only 22 critical skills that I was looking at, I knew that there was a possibility that some of the courses might contain the same number of critical skills. They might be different critical skills, but they might have the same overall number. So because of that, I had to come up with a way to break the ties, and that was where I came up with the whole idea of using the time limit as a difficulty standard, and then using that to determine what I call the qualification quotient, and using that to break ties when courses evaluated the same number of critical skills. Again, I had to develop all that, and I recently had a comment come in on one of my last videos where somebody was asking me about the way I went about that, and if there was a possibility that it could have been done better, essentially. And first off, I'm sure that there's a better way that that could have been done. I don't think that my system is perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but to my knowledge, it's the only system in existence to try to rate these courses, and not only with firearms qualification or training courses, even competition courses, to try to rate them somehow and determine that this course requires greater skill or a greater skill set to successfully fire through than this course. I don't know of any other rating system. So again, not only was this something that had never been done before that I was going to take on, but there were things that I was going to have to do along the way that had also never been done before, and the rating system was one of the first ones that I had to tackle. So after I had developed the idea and come up with a rating system to use to actually evaluate the courses and determine which ones I thought were better than the others, I had to actually get the courses. And for some of the states, it was very easy. In fact, I had people contacting me saying, can I send you a course? Can I send you our course? Can I send you a target? Thank you to all of you who did that. For some states, it was almost impossible to get a qualification course. In fact, from West Virginia, the very last state that I produced the video for, I was not able to actually get a course. I had to put together a course based on the West Virginia standards. And I was continuing. If you go back and you watch those early videos, which are still up, you might remember where I was saying I still need courses from this state and this state and this state and this state at the end of the video. I think with some of them it might have even been at the beginning of the video before it went through, to try to get the word out, hoping that more and more firearms instructors would become aware of this project and that they would see some value in it, And for an individual instructor to print off a copy of their qualification course and maybe grab a target out of a stack of several hundred and drop it in the mail and send it to me, I thought would be fairly easy. And again, for some of you, it very much was. I had courses and course descriptions and targets and things like that. I had them mailed to my office. And I think our clerk probably wondered why I was getting these fat envelopes from all over the country that were coming in on a regular basis. She never asked me about it, so I don't know what she might think to this day. But I did get some courses very easily. Some of them, as I said, were nearly impossible. I was contacted by someone from California early on. And if you saw the California course, you might remember that California does not have a statewide mandated course. They leave the course development up to firearms instructors in individual agencies. And I was contacted by an instructor in California, and he said, "Hey, I like the series. I'd like to send you ours. Would you be willing to shoot it?" I said, "Sure, that'd be great." And he said, "Okay, I just have to check with my supervisor and make sure it's okay to send this out." So a day or so went by, and I got an email from him, and he said he had checked with his supervisor, and his supervisor said, "Absolutely not. There's no way we're sending that out." And there's a concern in law enforcement. It's not just in the realm of firearms or officers' response to resistance and aggression, but it's also all throughout law enforcement. And that is this fear of civil and criminal liability, and also just a fear of somehow doing something or initiating something that's going to cause you problems. And unfortunately, the status quo, whatever that may be, is a known quantity. If I know as I sit here right now, or if I know as I sit in my office as an administrator or a supervisor, or if I sit in my cruiser as an officer, and I know that right now I'm not in trouble, I'm not being sued, I'm not getting written up, I'm not receiving any kind of disciplinary action against me, the community's not upset with me, I know that what I'm doing right now must be okay because nothing bad is happening. Or at least that's the mindset. If I change the status quo, then I don't know what that may be. There's a potential that maybe if things change somehow, then I could be in trouble, the community could be mad at me, I could be facing some kind of disciplinary process or whatever. So it's always a battle against that to get anything changed in the realm of law enforcement. And even something as simple as sending out a qualification course, which I would think would actually be something that agencies would want to do to let their community members know, here's our qualification course, here's the standard we expect our officers to meet. The people that are protecting you are expected to be able to be this proficient with their firearm, and we measure that with the course that we are using, and here it is. That's my thinking. Obviously, that's not shared by the entire law enforcement community. And again, it was very, very difficult to get some courses. And I mentioned in a comment recently that I suspect there were probably people in agencies and maybe even at the state level who were watching these courses. Those people will never publicly admit that they were watching it. They will never comment. They will never probably even recognize that their course was one of the ones that was featured. And as I said early on, the statewide mandated courses, I just made those known because those are set by either the legislature in those states or whatever organization governs law enforcement training or law enforcement firearms training. So those, I would just say, this is the Nebraska course or whatever course it might be. The courses that came from individual agencies, I would simply say it came from an individual agency. I did not identify those agencies because I didn't want to cause them problems. I wasn't trying to somehow tell them what you're doing is wrong, this is improper. Rather, I was just trying to assess their course. Eventually, I was assessing them based on what I had learned from all the other courses. And if they saw something they thought needed to be improved, they could improve it. If they thought what I was doing was ridiculous and they didn't want any part of it, they obviously didn't have to. But that was my thinking behind this, and again, trying to get some of these courses was not easy, and that's part of the reason that the series lasted as long as it did, which was, again, nearly 2 years. Actually, it was probably closer to 2.5 years if you go all the way back to where I was shooting the Ohio courses early on. And even if I had gotten courses very quickly, when you think of 50 qualification courses and 52 weeks within a year, if I'm recording one firearms qualification course per week, plus a semifinal video after every 10 courses, then we're obviously already at over a year if I was doing one a week. And I did not do one a week. I interspersed them with some other things to try to keep the content of my channel from getting stale, but then I always came back and then continued with that series. The guns. Early on with this series, I had the idea of continuing what I had been doing with the Ohio courses and using historical firearms to shoot my way through all the different various qualifications. And as the series progressed, it became obvious to me that that was not going to be something I could do. And there are various reasons for that. One is I only have so many true historical firearms that I could use, and I didn't want to keep using the same ones over and over and over again. In fact, one of the things that I wanted to do throughout the series to help keep it interesting was to use a different firearm for each qualification course, at least as much as I could. I also started to think that it might be interesting to be able to demonstrate the capabilities of a wide variety of handguns, because many times we get so wrapped up in the idea of what specific bullet launching device we're using, and in our mind we think if we just pick the right one, then everything else is going to be easy. And I don't really agree with that. I think the biggest and the most important aspect in any type of human endeavor, especially something like shooting, is the mindset and the training of the person who's employing that device. I think throughout the series we saw revolvers still holding their own on modern day qualification courses. Now, do they have disadvantages as compared to some semi-automatics? Yes, they do. They also have some advantages, one being the safety of the longer, heavier double action trigger. So I really wanted to try to emphasize that aspect as I moved on, that it's not the firearm that's being used, it's the skill of the person who is shooting and who's engaging in whatever qualification course that I was doing. And if you go back through the course, you'll see that I used 45 different handguns all the way through the course. I did have 5 that I used over again for various reasons, one of which was being that when that particular course rolled around, I didn't have another one that was available to me to use. Or there might have been some other reason that I chose to use the same one over. But as much as I could, for 45 of the 50 courses, I used a different firearm for each one. Some of you allowed me to borrow your handguns to be able to use for those courses. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And again, without the help that all of you gave me, I would not have been able to complete this series. So I want to emphasize that throughout this retrospective as well. What didn't happen, early on I had some grandiose ideas about this series. And in the back of my mind, what I thought was going to happen, or maybe I should say what I hoped was going to happen, is as news of this project spread by people seeing the videos and maybe the firearms training community communicating with each other and saying, hey, there's this guy on YouTube and he's trying to shoot a law enforcement firearms qualification course from each of the 50 states, that various instructors and maybe even people that weren't instructors but other folks would see the value of this series, and that it would pick up momentum as it went, and there would be more and more views coming in and more subscribers coming in. And to a limited degree that did happen, but never to the degree that I thought it might back at the beginning. If you look at the courses that have been up for a while, they really seem to, the number of views seem to depend on the specific firearm that I was using. If I use something like a .44 Magnum revolver, those tend to get a lot of views. And to some degree, the state involved seemed to garner a lot of views. If it was something like California or New York, some of the bigger ones, people seemed to be interested to see what kind of courses they were using. I suspect if I had made the agencies known for some of these courses, that might have also helped to get some more interest or some more views. But if you go back and look at them, most of the qualification course series has somewhere between about 2,000 and about 5,000 views, just depending on, again, which firearm and which state specifically is being featured. So it really never progressed to the point. I was hoping that maybe by the end of the series I might be seeing somewhere on the order of 10 times that many views from each one of these. That never happened. I also thought that maybe along the way there might be some other entities that would see this series and see some value in it. Maybe a target company that might sponsor some targets. And I've mentioned the targets before in the videos. It's not so much that I didn't know where to get targets. I know some of you sent me in information in the comments section about the various online target retailers, and that was where I could get some from. Now I will say some targets are unique. And there are some of these that are used, and I'm not sure where they get them printed from. I was able to find them online, but I was not able to find them in the major target retailers. The problem with the targets is I only needed one or two. And most of these targets, when you order them for an agency, you order 100, 200, 1,000, however many you think you're going to need for your agency's future needs. To order one or two, first off, you pay a premium. Sometimes you wait a long time until they get a large number of orders for that particular target, and then they print out a whole bunch of them. And also, the shipping that I would be paying for one or two targets every time for each of the 50 states was almost more than I would have been paying for the targets themselves. So that was why I was asking any of you who are firearms instructors, if you've got a bunch of these and you can package one up along with the course description when you send it to me, I would greatly appreciate it. And again, many of you did, and that was tremendous. Thank you very much. For some of the states, I did order targets, and for some of them, I either used a different target that I thought was similar that I had on hand, or in some cases, I modified a target that I had on hand in order to bring that into line more or less with the dimensions of the targets that were used for that specific course. And as you saw throughout the series, there were a bunch of different targets used. Now, some of the states used the same courses, and some of the states had several different targets, and you could choose which one you wanted to use. But for the most part, all the states used a different target. So the idea that a target company might sponsor me and just say, hey, let us know what you need and we'll make sure you have those targets, that never happened. I also had an idea in the back of my head that maybe an ammunition company might spot this and say, hey, there's value to that. We'd like to sponsor you in this and let us know what ammunition you need and we'll make sure you always have that. And I used ammunition. The only major cartridge used by law enforcement I think that didn't find its way into this series was 357 SIG. And I didn't exclude it on purpose. I just don't have anything that chambers that particular cartridge. And nobody loaned me a firearm chamber for 357 SIG, so I just never used that one. Otherwise, I think I used every major cartridge throughout this series that law enforcement has used for probably the last 50 years anyway, maybe 60, 75 years, something like that. Everything from 45 ACP to 38 Super, 44 Special. I mean, all those things were in there, those historic cartridges. But no, the ammunition company sponsorship never came along. And I thought maybe one of the big training organizations out there from law enforcement like ILFE or somebody like that might spot this and say, hey, you know, that's really cool. We'd like to help you out. You know, we'll give you some support, whatever you need for that. And that never happened. So there were those ideas that I had in the back of my mind for this series early on, and actually that I kind of held out hope for probably through about halfway or through the halfway point, that just never materialized. What did happen was all of you. And I have said many times, and I will repeat this again, I have the best viewers on YouTube. I don't have the most, but I have the best. And you all are tremendous, and you proved it all throughout this series. As I said before, by sending me these courses, by sending me the targets, by loaning me firearms, some of you actually sent me cash contributions, some of you gave me ammunition, some of you sold me ammunition at a ridiculously reduced price. And again, there is no way I could have completed this series without the help from all of you. And the response that I got far and away exceeded my expectations. And again, that is a credit to all of you. thank you very much for helping me complete this goal. What I'm hoping that I accomplish through the process of this series is for anyone who's interested in law enforcement firearms training to be able to look at the courses from all the different states and see what the takeaways might be in terms of ways to improve their own course, maybe some of the things that are in some of those courses, and particularly if it's a course that's used by an individual agency or an individual state, where there's something that's contained that maybe is dated or potentially something that, because of our modern day training doctrine or current environment, we should take out of that course, that everyone might reassess exactly what they're using for law enforcement firearms qualification and try to determine exactly what they want to accomplish with that process. We've seen some of the courses that really harken back to the days when it wasn't much more than putting the coffee can on top of the fence post and shooting it off of there, and as long as the officer was able to hit it 6 out of 8 times and knock it off the fence post, then the officer qualified. That's an exaggeration, of course, but there were some of the courses that were not much more developed beyond that. It was a simple marksmanship assessment, and as long as the officer had more holes in the proper part of the target than they didn't have in the proper part of the target, then that officer qualified. We were able to contrast those with courses that were very well developed, very tactically sound, that someone had obviously put a lot of time and thought into looking at the types of skills they wanted to develop in officers and they wanted officers to be able to possess, so that hopefully if that officer finds themselves in a lethal force encounter, they're able to employ their firearm properly and professionally, and most importantly, justifiably. So I'm hoping that at the end of this course, obviously I did this in the framework of a competition to choose the best law enforcement firearms qualification course in the country. And again, that was to keep it interesting and keep it hopefully entertaining. But what I really hope people take away from this is the idea that they should look at these courses, again, think about what they're trying to accomplish, what they're trying to determine, and then design their courses accordingly. Interestingly enough, I'm a member of a firearms forum online, and one of the people on that forum is none other than Masad Ayub, and I hope he doesn't mind me mentioning his name. But recently he sent me, he actually posted something on the forum where he had come across an online article that was written by another respected firearms instructor who had come across my qualification series. And he was talking about what he thought the series was accomplishing, and he spoke very favorably of it. He had a couple of quibbles with it, which I understand. I mean, it's my own idea, all my own concept. I developed it on my own, and certainly other people who are very knowledgeable can have different ideas about the way the course or the series could have been done. Even so, he was complimentary, and I appreciate that. And I have received calls from firearms instructors across the country at different times. Calls, emails, communications, asking me about their course, how do I think I could improve it, and I tried to make the best suggestions that I could. And that's been interesting. It's really helped me to feel like I am accomplishing something with this series, and there is value to it. Beyond just the YouTube experience and the entertainment of it and people being able to watch and maybe use it to develop their own firearm skills, but actually being able to contribute something to the law enforcement firearms training community, and that's what I'm really, really hoping that I've accomplished with this series. So now what? A lot of you have asked me about shooting other firearms qualification courses, and I've mentioned that I have some qualification courses from other countries that I would like to shoot eventually. I've got some federal law enforcement firearms qualification courses. I've mentioned in the videos that I want to do another series, or at least some of the courses involving rifle and shotgun qualifications. I don't think I'm going to do this type of a series again. I don't think I'm going to try to do every single course and evaluate those courses. I think what I'm going to do is periodically I'll shoot my way through, say, a federal law enforcement course, or the UK law enforcement firearms qualification course or something like that. Just to be able to contrast it back to the courses that we've seen in this series, and I think I'll probably do a mini evaluation in those videos when I produce them, rather than trying to do such an involved, lengthy project where I'm competing or comparing, rather, say, every law enforcement firearms qualification course in the world or something like that. But I will do those periodically. But there are a lot of other things that I want to do, a lot of other videos that I want to produce. There are some review videos and things like that that I also want to get out. And there are some other videos many of you have asked me to do beyond the qualification series. So I want to get into some of those. But you'll still see a qualification course from time to time, but you just won't see one quite like this again from me. At least I don't think so, unless I change my mind. I want to make one quick point before I wrap things up, folks. I make no claim to have actually qualified in all 50 states. There are some states that have requirements that I did not meet. For example, there are some states that require the qualification course to be administered by a firearms instructor certified in that state. There are some states that have requirements that the course be shot multiple times or that have other requirements. So I am not in any way claiming that I am qualified with a firearm in all 50 states, only that I fired a qualification course from each of the 50 states. So there you have it, folks, my retrospective on the Law Enforcement Firearms Qualification Course series. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or comments, as always, make sure you forward those to me. Remember, if you purchase anything from Optics Planet, be sure to use my discount code, which is... And if you use that discount code, it's good for 5% off anything you purchase from Optics Planet. See you next time, folks. And until then, good shooting. Bye-bye.